Sup, people? We are back with another episode of Throwdown Draw. Last time we inked up Lucy and we inked up Rebecca. So this time we're going to be doing some color. Alright, let's get started.
Nintendo captured lightning in a bottle with Ocarina of Time, but for its sequel, they wanted to diverge into its own adventure and style, culminating in one of the darkest and mysterious titles in the franchise, with an entirely new antagonist, a deep and rich backstory, and new mechanics that took exploration, combat, and puzzle solving to the next level. This is The Legend of Zelda: Majora's Mask Iceberg. Been Drowned. This was a creepypasta / alternate reality game. The story begins with a young man receiving a cartridge of Majora's Mask that is haunted by a ghost. The ghost eventually starts communicating with the man through his dreams. An elaborate backstory develops as one of the most beloved and notorious ARGs to exist. Star Fox reference. When the second row of masks have been acquired by the player, you can examine it to potentially catch a Star Fox 64 reference. The Keaton mask resembles Fox or his father, James. The Bremen mask resembles a bird, which is an allusion to Falco. The bunny hood resembles Peppy Hare. Danjiro's mask closely resembles Slippy. And the Mask of Sense resembles Pigma, a former member of the Star Fox team. Thwarting the abduction. Majora's Mask has many mysteries. Perhaps the biggest of them all is the existence of what appears to be aliens, though all references to them are referred to as ghosts, or more simply, them. The young character Romani is said to be the only one aware of their existence. You can play a minigame whereby Link defends Romani Ranch from these invaders. If the player fails this event, they will abduct the cows as well as Romani herself. The next day, Romani will have returned to the ranch. However, she's much different than the previous day. She hardly speaks and seems to have no memory of the event. She even seems to appear frustrated or in pain, some going so far as to suggest she's been lobotomized. Many have speculated that these beings were somehow linked to the Gorman, who are clearly malicious towards the Romani Ranch. However, the director of the game has remarked on these creatures' existence in a 2015 interview. He states, "The reason we used this at the time was because Japan was experiencing something of a UFO boom, and it even went so far as for shows on TV to cover it." He goes on to say, "The idea of UFOs abducting people led to this whole idea of Earth being invaded by aliens becoming rather popular. I thought it would be really interesting and scary to use in a project. That's how we decided to go with that, regardless of its implementation." It's theorized that the creatures are based off of the Flatwoods Monster, a real-world documented UFO case, who closely resembles the creatures. You can also see various pieces of art throughout the ranch that display UFOs. The Hand. Another of the game's most mysterious instances is the long arm and hand that can be found inside a toilet. The player can provide it with a piece of paper. In exchange, the hand gives Link a piece of heart that was once dropped into the toilet. There is not much context given outside of this single event. However, several creatures within the Zelda games appear somewhat similar in nature. The Dexahand and the Floor Master enemies both appear as arms with a hand, and the Wall Master even appears as an individual hand. Players have theorized about some connection between these beings, but Shigeru Miyamoto has stated that the creature known only as 3 question marks is a reference to a ghost story where a hand emerges from a toilet and grabs the person sitting on it. Trading Post Man. This character has 2 different roles within the game. By day, he is the salesman of the trading post. He has a friendly demeanor and runs a respectable, straightforward business. However, at certain points throughout the day, he no longer works at this location. He disguises himself with an altered demeanor, running a shady pawn shop that sells stolen goods. Most of the townsfolk seem oblivious to this act, minus a few characters who are in cohorts with the man. Murdering Saken. At one point throughout the cafe and Anju quest, a character named Saken will steal a bomb bag from the store owner's old mother. If the player shoots the bag with an arrow, it explodes. This causes the quest to fail, forcing you to repeat that part of the quest again. Perhaps what's most interesting is that in the process of doing this, you actually eradicate Saken completely. Alcoholic milk. In the land of Termina, milk is actually said to be alcoholic. That is why there is a milk bar that does not serve children. Gorman is also portrayed as an alcoholic throughout the game. Crimea even lets her little sister celebrate their final day in style before the moon crashes. She gives Romani her own mask, and finally lets her get hammered on some of that dairy hooch. Unused assets. Like many other games, Majora's Mask has an accessible debug menu that allows the player to access various content. One of the only known methods of reaching the debug menu is by playing the Song of Soaring over 2,000 times. Ocarina of Time served as the framework for Majora's Mask development. They were given a shorter amount of time to develop the game, as well as a requirement to reuse assets. Because of this, several elements of OOT can be found through the debug menu, despite it being an unused asset. The game includes quite a few unused songs, playback data, and even instrument sounds that were only used in Ocarina of Time. These songs can be accessed via Game Shark codes. The Sun's song will accelerate the flow of time for the next 12 hours, while Saria's song simply plays the music and has no other effect. You can also find several items, even some that can be stored within bottles. Not surprisingly, they don't serve much of a purpose. There are also unused assets existing as a set of cutscenes. It's supposed to show the fairy helping Link to pose properly. She also has him practice his spin attack. Her holding him in place is the tutorial for the spin attack, and she won't let him go until he properly performs the move. Another removed cutscene shows Link going through some additional physical training. This was done to earn an enhanced defense. And perhaps what's most interesting about these cutscenes was the fact that they end inside the fierce deity form. Some theorize that the mask may have originally served a larger role within the game. Others think that this may not have even taken place in physical form, instead existing as a psychological experience through which Link improves through his journey. Link stole the Kokiri sword. In Ocarina of Time, we see that Link is only supposed to be borrowing the Kokiri sword. However, he starts out Majora's Mask with it. What's even more interesting is that the sword has received slight modifications. It has a yellow handle and a different blade. This suggests that he's already reforged the Kokiri sword. It also may imply that he has no intention of returning the sword, although he may be physically unable to return it. Gray NFR Demo Cartridge. Minigames will have separate demo versions of the game. Oftentimes they will feature different, or limited segments of the game. Both Ocarina of Time and Majora's Mask have gold and gray demo cartridges, entitled Not for Resale. The gray NFR cartridge is the rarest and most expensive of them all. It's the earliest known version of the American version of the game, thus it shares a lot of similarities with the Japanese version. The game starts with a selection screen, where you choose from 8 areas to spawn. You're granted limited items with nearly all masks and all songs. There's also a number of translation differences contained throughout. One of the most notable differences is that Crimea mentions Madame Aroma as her aunt. If this were the case, it would make her cousins with her crush, Cafe. The final release only referred to her as some middle-aged woman instead. Death Metaphors. This is a commonly theorized metaphor for Majora's Mask that suggests the 5 stages of grief can be seen throughout. These are the phases that people go through when they lose something or someone of importance. Link is said to be going through these stages as he lost someone. Some think it's his friend, Navi, while others think it's more esoteric, and he's grieving over his own death. The Clock Tower is said to represent denial. The Deku Palace is considered the anger phase. Snowhead would be considered bargaining. The Great Bay is theorized to represent depression. The final stage of acceptance is torn between several options. One is the Econo Valley. Another is defeating the mask itself. And another theory is that it's the fierce deity mask. Some even theorize that these are all just feelings that are being felt while Link is slowly dying after falling at the beginning of the game. The moon always had a face. Many of the NPCs have dialogue that comments about the moon. However, they don't make comments about the existence of a face on the moon. Instead, they just seem to remark about the strangeness of the expression of the face. This implies that there has always been a face on the moon, even before the events of the game. Zelda Gaiden. The Nintendo 64 once had an additional peripheral component that allowed players to use proprietary discs. This device was called the 64 Disc Drive, or 64DD. There were 2 planned Zelda titles for this device. The first was an add-on for Ocarina of Time, called You're a Zelda, which translates to Other Zelda. Another was titled Zelda Gaiden, which translated to Zelda Side Story. The former was cancelled, while Gaiden's development continued. However, the team decided that the game too closely resembled Ocarina of Time. They asked Miyamoto to create a different game entirely. He agreed, but challenged the team to create the game in a single year. The game's name was changed to Majora's Mask and released later. Not surprisingly, a large number of changes were made throughout the development of the game. We have very little information about the title. Some things we do know, like a fishing minigame called Jabu Jabu Fishing, which was even commented on by Miyamoto, saying that if you manage to catch Jabu Jabu, it may even prevent the moon from falling. Another interesting feature Miyamoto spoke of was a merchant that sold additional time added to the in-game clock for rupees. There were a number of items removed from the beta as well. Each of the instruments for Link's transformations originally had their own items. There was also an adult Link mask. The Goron used a hammer as an attack instead of a punch. There were several other items that were removed, however most of them are a mystery. Majora's Cult. This is in reference to the carvings and objects found in Twinmold's lair and Stone Tower. They seem to depict Majora's Mask. People have theorized that these are places of worship where the mask was utilized. The moon isn't evil. This theory suggests that the moon is being held captive by the Skull Kid. While the face it makes could be perceived as menacing, it could also be seen as an anguish or torture. The moon also drops items known as the moon's tears. Why would the moon be crying? Happy Mask Salesman's identity. This character is an elusive individual with not much backstory provided. His first appearance is in Ocarina of Time, though not to the same level as Majora's Mask. Some think he appears to be sinister in nature. Obviously he has some more elaborate and frustrated animations, but even his smile can appear menacing. He also seems to be more knowledgeable than just about any other character Link comes across. He seems to be the only one to possess and share knowledge of Majora's Mask. He's aware of the 3-day time loop. He also seems to be aware of Link's previous accomplishments and where he originally comes from, and most notably of all is his knowledge of the Song of Healing, which seems to convert troubled or damaged souls into wearable masks. The salesman also seems to possess some notable abilities like gliding and vanishing entirely. He was also able to follow Link for some unknown amount of time, without alerting the player of his existence. There exist a number of different theories for the identity of this character. Some think he's exactly as he appears, a random mask salesman. However, some think that he's much more significant. Some theorize that he's actually a god of some kind, with an ability to convert beings into masks, while at the same time putting the soul to rest. Some suggest that he was never alive throughout the entire game, existing only as a ghost or some spirit. Others think that it's a physical embodiment of the 4 giants, as they were also knowledgeable of the Song of Healing. An interesting note is that all of the children in the moon have the same hairstyle as the Happy Mask Salesman. Some think that he's Link's counterpart, especially with how many times he helped him through the game. He frees Link from his curse, teaches him the Song of Healing, and it's implied that he is the one to reset the cycle if Link fails to play the Song of Time before the moon falls. Or is the opposite true? Perhaps the salesman is the hidden antagonist of the game, with intentions of destroying the world. Is it possible that the salesman is even Majora himself? Intense psychological trauma. Each time Link wears a new transformation mask, you see him screaming in what appears to be absolute agony. The reason for this is because he is overwhelmed by experiencing the mask bearer's entire lifetime of emotions all at once. By the end of the game, especially if you've worn the Fierce Deity mask, your character will have experienced several lifetimes worth of psychological trauma and emotional overload. Majora the Dragon. According to a manga side story of the game, Majora was said to originally be a giant dragon-like creature. His responsibility was to guard an empty and timeless land that existed as neither living nor dead. The creature's armor was said to be capable of granting wishes and granting great power unto its owner. Beings of all kinds sought the armor, but Majora the Dragon devoured them all, until one day, an adult appearing similar to Link approaches Majora. But instead of seeking his armor, he only sought communication. After several days pass, events occur where the dragon perishes, leaving behind his armor. In attempts to seal the power away, the man carved a mask from the armor that was left behind. The Twilight in the Mask. We learn through the Happy Mask Salesman that Majora's Mask was once used as an ancient artifact. It was used in dark magical rituals for a time, before it was sealed in shadow. Some fans have speculated that the Interlopers, who are also known as the Twilight, are the ancient race that used the mask in their rituals. These beings are from Twilight Princess, and already own a powerful artifact mask, known as the Fused Shadow. Many think that their mask was created as their own version of Majora's Mask. The Fused Shadow also appears to possess an eye that some argue is similar to the eyes of Majora's Mask. Some go so far as to suggest that they created Majora's Mask as well. Rivalry of the Gods. This is in reference to a theory about the builders of the Stone Tower. It's said that they didn't worship the goddesses. Instead, they worshipped the 4 giants of the land. The theory suggests that they built the tower simply as a means to reach the sacred realm. It was their goal to defeat the goddesses by using the giant's mask. When the goddesses heard of their plan, they decided to completely turn the tower upside down. Kalu Limpa. The self-proclaimed reincarnated fairy played only a minor role within Majora's Mask, but his importance increased as he had more appearances within the series. Some have speculated that he played more of a significant role than most people realize. Some fans believe that he is the Termina counterpart to Link. They both wear green outfits and have a strong connection with fairies. It's also worth pointing out that Link was a child stuck in the body of an adult in Ocarina of Time, and Tingle seems to be the same thing, although in more of a man-child sense. Another interesting note is that Tingle was originally seen in Termina. However, every appearance after that was in Hyrule. This has caused players to theorize that he was exiled or willingly fled from Termina. Some even think that he now acts as a dimensional refugee. Mario and Slave Theory. We're aware that masks can be created by transforming the body and soul into a physical object that takes the form of a mask. This theory postulates that the Happy Mask salesman, or one of his cohorts, turned Mario into a mask. The theory goes on to suggest that this act may have even been done during the slumber during the events of Super Mario Bros. 2. We obviously don't see the mask being used during the playthrough of the game. However, one can theorize if perhaps some of the Mario games featured somebody wearing the Mario mask, transforming them into the embodiment of the Italian plumber. What a nightmare that would be. Who would want to experience repeatedly getting friend-zoned by Peach? Lightning rarely strikes twice, and Nintendo knew that going into the development of Majora's Mask. Instead of trying to make Ocarina of Time 2, they made something entirely new, with elements and aspects that can't be found anywhere else, and it still holds strong as one of the best games.
Occasionally, a game will come along that sets the tone for many future games to come. Some even take it a step further and become so ubiquitous that they define a genre. Let's examine the title that cemented its franchise in gaming history and helped to spark the speedrunning community at large. This is the Super Metroid Iceberg. Not an update. A common misconception about Super Metroid is that Super Metroid is an update of the previous installment. This is because of the fact that words like Super and Ultimate were added to the titles of games around that time to signify that this is an improved version of the game, such as with Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat. The real reason behind the Super in the game's name was because it was released on the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, which is similar to what Nintendo did to the games by adding 64 or Advance to their games. And in reality, it's a third game in the series. Metroidvania. Super Metroid is the game that, alongside Castlevania's Symphony of the Night, is responsible for the Metroidvania genre. The reason that Super Metroid is the game that is credited for the establishing of the genre instead of the first game in the series is because Super Metroid added a lot more in terms of content and strengthened the blueprint that was originally set in motion by the first two games. Thus, Super Metroid is considered one of the best games in the series to the point that it defined a genre itself. And that, of course, means that it inspired a generation of game developers and continues to be part of the core of the games that are released under this genre even today. Secret moves. Super Metroid is known for harboring many secret moves that are not explained to the player. As a result, many players have beaten the game without knowing about their existence at all, and those who did learn about them consider several of them difficult to pull off. However, once you master these special moves, the game almost feels different when played. Examples of these moves are the wall jump, bomb jump, multi-bomb spread, and even the ability to restore your health on the go if you have certain items that are required. Alien 3 Parallels. Several aspects of Super Metroid are similar to Alien 3, which is a parallel that is often spoken about. For example, both of the stories depict a bond between the female protagonist and the primary antagonist, and both of the stories end with a sacrifice that gets rid of the enemy species once and for all. Ironically enough, Alien 3 was critically panned, yet Super Metroid is considered one of the best games of all time. Troubled development. If you were surprised by the hiatus that the franchise went through before Metroid Dread came out, you were probably too young at the time of Super Metroid's release. The game came out almost a decade after the first Metroid game, although the second game exists in between. It was a handheld-only game, and it took over a half a year for Nintendo to approve the project because they were intimidated by how ambitious the project was. And that's not all. The game was nearly canceled 3 separate times because of how many times it was delayed and the fact that Nintendo did not originally believe in the game's potential success. Fortunately, the company loved the game once it was completed, and it went on to sell over 1 million units. Rumored behind-the-scene drama. Through believable hearsay, it is believed that Super Metroid was meant to be the final game in the series, and that's why there was such a wait between that and the following game in the series. However, once Metroid Prime was put into development, it is believed that this became the reason for Yoshio Sakamoto to start developing Metroid Fusion, because he wanted to make sure that he's still involved in the series. One thing in particular that supports this claim is that Metroid Prime games take place before Super Metroid in the storyline, and with all that said and done, Yoshio Sakamoto came back with Metroid Dread this year, whereas Metroid Prime 4 is currently still in development hell. Godzilla sounds. Super Metroid bosses use sound effects from Godzilla movies. The developers decided that the sound effects that they are making are not good enough, so they sampled sounds directly from a number of different Godzilla films. And it's pretty noticeable once you listen to both of them closely. This technique was pretty rare for its time, so that's another reason as to what makes it special and unusual. Naked Samus. The early Metroid games have been criticized in recent times for its sexualization of Samus, although thousands defend it too, saying that it was an alright way of establishing the badass heroine's gender. One way or another, it's no secret today that you can unlock the ending in the original game where Samus is wearing short clothing, and the death animation in Super Metroid has her armor break, which leaves her in nothing but a bikini before you re-continue the game. However, Super Metroid was originally meant to take things to the next level, because Samus was meant to be temporarily naked, and she also screamed in a voiceover recorded by Minako Hamano. It was eventually scrapped because Nintendo knew that American censorship would be against the idea, and the voice recording unintentionally sounded sexual as well. And of course, in the recent games, she has a blue suit that can be seen in the Prime games intact when she dies and her armor explodes, replacing the previous tradition of showing her bikini. The birth of speedrunning. Super Metroid is often credited as the game that kicked off the trend of speedrunning games, which is one of the most well-known concepts of playing a game today, especially on live streams and in physical events that usually contribute massively to charities. The reason behind this is the fact that the game rewards players with different endings based on how quickly the player finishes it. Although other games had this trend too, Super Metroid made this concept feel more intense because of how non-linear the game is and how it has so many hidden abilities that completely change how the game is played. This led players to partaking in an early version of speedrunning, and it turned into a habit that is now a major part of the gaming and speedrunning communities. The Third Eye. Super Metroid is filled with cut content and secrets of all kind, but one secret in the game deserves a separate mention of its own, which is the hidden third camera in the game's levels. If you've played the game before, you may remember the two cameras in the game that stare at Samus and track her movements with a harmless yellow light on the surface of Planet Zebes. You can find two of these cameras and they disappear after you collect mandatory upgrades, and Samus is attacked by the space pirates. However, there is a third hidden eye that cannot be found in a normal playthrough and is only discoverable if the player uses exploits. Although the secret was previously discovered, it's not something that was known widely. A YouTuber named Golden Chorizo Code eventually brought it into the public attention this year. By using the exploits, he managed to enter an early room and made the game believe that the player only has the morph ball as an upgrade and not anything else. By doing this, the player can enter a room that normally cannot be entered without certain conditions being met, and inside a Chozo statue that generally has an extra missile tank becomes a third eye camera. By further breaking into the game through graphical exploits, the statue eventually disappears, and you can only see the camera itself by returning to the area in that state. It is believed that this is simply a leftover item from the early development stages of the game, and it was never removed because the player was never meant to find it. And some fans also believe that this was supposed to be a main part of the game and simply scrapped because it was considered unnecessary or would have taken too much time to be relevant. One way or another, it's fun to see what's left of a game after they completely break it. General secrets and glitches. We've covered the stuff that deserves separate mentions, now let's go over the general secrets and glitches that remain. One interesting and notable thing about the game's glitches is that unlike other games that get fixed on its re-releases, Super Metroid's glitches and exploits were typically left inside the game on purpose because the developers and Nintendo both know how much the fans enjoy them and that it defines the way the game works, especially since it contributes so heavily to speedrunning. There is a special setting mode in the game's options, and you can turn on the ability to moonwalk from there, which lets you walk backwards while you shoot an enemy. There is a hidden message in the game which says, "Special thanks to Genji Kubota and all debut staff," which can be found in the game's files. A specific attack glitch in the game is called the Murder Beam, which is often used by speedrunners and experts of the game in general. If you charge the beam and go to the weapon selection menu to equip the Charge, Ice, Wave, or Spazer, and move to High Jump Boots, you can press left and A at the same time to equip the Plasma Beam. This gives you all 5 beams equipped at the same time, and then once you return to the game, face left and let go of the button, and this will unleash an extremely destructive Murder Beam. What makes this even more interesting is that the game will crash if you attempt to fire it while it's uncharged, firing with a power bomb equipped, or face any direction that is not left. And ironically, the attack is most useful on the Mother Brain, which is much later in the game, and if you accidentally crash it, you could lose hours of your time. Other notable glitches include the ability to stop Zebatites from spawning, standing up in the Mother Brain fight when you're supposed to be on your knees, creating Samus clones, jumping higher than usual, retaining the running speed while in the Morph Ball state, disabling the detection of valid hits in various green gates across ZBs, and letting go of a charge shot during the final ZB's countdown right after you exit the last door, which unleashes a giant beam shot. Secret Demo. It's not every day that we sit down and look at idle demos of a game, but that's a trend that used to be very popular back in the day. And the demos that were played when you did not press anything while the game ran were also called attracts. Since then, they are meant to make the player want to give the game a shot. Super Metroid has 3 demos, and most players have seen these at certain points. However, something that people don't often realize is that there is a 4th idle demo that plays if you beat the game at least once, and it shows off hidden game mechanics that players have to figure out on their own. Secret Addition to Ending. Aside from the general ability to get different endings based on how fast you beat the game, there is one detail that even some hardcore fans of the Metroid series will often miss out on. When you're escaping at the end while the countdown is in place, if you don't go to your ship and instead go to the room where you first got Morph Ball bombs, you can find some critters that helped you escape earlier in the game. If you help them leave the room, you can leave again, and this adds a small addition to the ending where you can see that you saved them. This is what sparked the speedrunning debate between saving the animals or saving the frames to complete the game faster. Golden Chorizo Room. Like most 2D games of that era, the game has a debug code that the player can enter, which was interestingly not discovered until around 2010. In the lower Norfair area, before you enter the room with the Golden Chorizo boss fight, open the door and roll into a ball while holding down the 4 main buttons, A, X, B, and Y. When you enter the room with this method, you will instantly have every item in the game aside from the screw attack, such as 700 energy, 300 reserve energy, 100 missiles, 20 super missiles, and 20 power bombs. You get screw attack quite soon afterwards anyway, so that's probably the reason as to why you don't get it right away. The game does have a normal debug mode too that can be activated through external tools such as the Pro Action Replay, and it allows players to spawn wherever they want and to use certain items and random sprites. Cut content. There are 3 unused enemy in the game. One of them is called Bang, and it grows bigger based on how much damage it takes. Eventually, it explodes and deals all of the damage that the player dealt back to them. It's a very dangerous enemy, and that might have been why it was taken out of the game. The second enemy is called the Reflect, and similar to Bang, this enemy reflects the player's shots back at them. What makes this fun though is that when you shoot at it from certain angles, It reflects the player's shots in different directions, which was used in an element for solving puzzles in the fan-made ROM hack Super Metroid redesign. It's obvious why Reflect was scrapped, since it's not useful in any part of the original game. The third unused enemy is Stoke, and it looks like a miniature Crocomire. It has collision detection and basic movement, but it doesn't always function properly. The enemy was meant to be found in the Crateria room where you tunnel through as a morph ball, but it's unknown as to why the enemy was scrapped. Additionally, there is a weird creature with only a mouth that was meant to spawn next to Mother Brain, but its purpose is unknown and it has no programming. And lastly, there is the Shack Tool attack that is disabled in the game but can be re-enabled by using the Game Genie. Aside from the unused enemies and sprites, there are two color palettes in the game that are unused, which are the red Crateria and the black Brinstar color schemes. Then we have unused titles, an unused title card, and a couple of unused rooms, such as the Lower Norfair Edge, a debug testing room with a bunch of tiles surrounding the player, an unused recharge room, a debug game over screen, an unused Shack Tool room, an older version of the Golden Chozo room, and some regional content that was scrapped, such as the aforementioned sexual voice and some other unknown voices. Theories. One of the most notable fan theories is related to Fantoon. It is believed that Fantoon is an Aurora unit because we have seen ghosts exist in the Metroid universe, and they are often corrupted. The reason behind this claim is that it looks like a mutated Mother Brain and haunts a crashed ship. Not only that, but Fantoon has control over the power grid as well. And this is further elaborated upon by the fact that Fantoon is much bigger in Other M, and you only fight him after the ending since he needs to absorb energy to grow stronger. Another commonly debated theory is aimed at the Galactic Federation's motives. Fans theorize that these space pirates are not truly pirates, and instead they are simply people who don't agree with the Federation and tried to use the Metroids as just an energy source. Meanwhile, the Galactic Federation could potentially be terrorists who try to use Metroids to create weapons for themselves and just try to keep them away from others. These are typically military power moves.
Hey, how's it going?
This theory is further strengthened by Other M, although how canon that game
Welcome
is will
to
always
my
remain a
my
divisive
silly
topic.
stream. Just here drawing some
Debunked
Cyberpunk
theory.
and listening to videos.
Straying away from the plausible theories that might be entirely true.
If you have any
Here's one
questions
that
or
lived
whatever,
on
just
for some time and
feel
was
free to
eventually
ask.
debunked officially later on. In the remake of the original Metroid, called Zero Mission, players saw a massive HQ called the Space Pirate Mothership, which is destroyed by Samus in the end. A majority of fans thought this ship is the same as the wrecked ship from Super Metroid. However, in an official interview on the Metroid Zero Mission website, the director of the game confirmed that the two ships are different from each other. Many people weren't ecstatic to hear about this news, but at the same time, it's always good to know the facts over fiction. Even though the franchise has evolved and changed throughout the years, its notoriety never waned, and the world-renowned superheroine continues to excite fans around the world, in more ways than one. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and let me know which topics you'd like to see covered next.
While it's never been officially stated, it's heavily implied that Banon and Arvis
Let's do Twilight Princess.
For the first 12 installments, The Legend of Zelda has been a vibrant, lighthearted, and cartoony franchise, but for their 13th game, Nintendo opted for a much more realistic, darker, and mature Zelda title. The first and only Zelda title to be rated T for teen on the ESRB and ages 12 and up by the PEGI rating system for containing scenes of animated blood and fantasy violence. And for the first time ever, the States received a Zelda console game before Japan. This is The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess Iceberg. The beginning and the end.
Twilight Princess was originally going to be a GameCube exclusive only. However, it was delayed by Nintendo so that the developers have enough time to refine it, add a few more things to it, and then port it to the Nintendo Wii as well. The game ended up being a launch title for the Wii, and at the same time, the GameCube version ended up being the last first-party game that was ever released for the console. So, in an ironic way, the game marked the beginning of one console and the end of another. The second best. The debate of which Zelda game is the best is always going to be a divisive topic among fans. However, Twilight Princess was the best-selling Zelda game of all time for over a decade after its release, as it sold almost 9 million copies by the year of 2015. It only lost that title after Breath of the Wild was released in 2018, which is not a surprise given how influential and immensely well-received that game was. The gap is pretty large though, as Breath of the Wild ended up selling over 27 million copies, which even earned it a spot on the list of the best-selling video games of all time. Manga series. Twilight Princess received a manga adaptation penned and illustrated by Akira Himekawa. However, it started almost 10 years after the original release of the game, and coincided only with the HD remake of the game that was released on the Wii U. The manga ran from 2016 and only concluded this year on January 30th. Spin-offs. Twilight Princess has 2 spin-offs. One of them is Link's Crossbow Training, which is a shooting video game that was bundled with the Wii Zapper as a way to introduce players to it, and it was the first game to use the Zapper at the time of its release as well. It was said that the team originally planned to make a direct sequel of Twilight Princess, but the sequel was unfortunately sidelined to work on this game instead. The game is pretty simple and follows Link as he perfects his crossbow marksmanship, and it reuses many assets from the Twilight Princess, such as enemies, environments, and more. The dev team originally wanted the game to have more bosses and a larger story, but Shigeru Miyamoto was opposed to that idea, and told the team to make it a simpler game instead, giving them a list of do-nots that included things like including cinematics or having an epic tale as the game's narrative. He simply wanted it to be an easy and accessible shooter that made use of the Twilight Princess's rich world, but did not take itself as seriously as a Zelda game. The game is also one of the only 6 Zelda games that have Link's name in the title, others being Adventure of Link, Link to the Past, Link's Awakening, A Link Between Worlds, and Link Faces of Evil. The other spin-off of the game is called My Nintendo Picross: Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess. Long title. It was made to accompany the launch of the My Nintendo loyalty program and was a Picross puzzle game developed for the Nintendo 3DS. There are no more spin-offs for this particular game in the series, but Midna, Zant, and Agatha all appeared as playable warriors in the Hyrule Warriors game, which was a crossover game that brought together many Legend of Zelda characters. The Lord of the Rings. The original Legend of Zelda game was inspired by the legendary author J.R.R. Tolkien. In the Lord of the Rings novels, which inspired the developers and helped them create the world in which Link embarks on his adventures. Twilight Princess, on the other hand, is inspired by the Lord of the Rings movies, which had just come out at the time of the game's development and were very popular. The movie, since it was visually remarkable, alongside being a general great story like the novels, helped the developers to envision a new world for the game that had a good blend of fantasy and realism combined, unlike the cartoonish Wind Waker that had come out before it. What could have been? Twilight Princess is made from the same team that worked on the Wind Waker, and the game was first titled The Wind Waker 2. It was going to have similar cel-shaded graphics, and it wouldn't have been too different from the previous game. However, Nintendo of America spoke to the game's director, saying that they believed the sales of Wind Waker were too low because of its cartoonish appearance, and that such an art style would make people think that the game is meant for children. Concerned after hearing this feedback, the director, Eiji Aonuma, wanted to create a realistic Zelda game, but Miyamoto was a bit hesitant about the game's presentation being too different from the rest of the franchise. And eventually, the team settled on trying to add innovative features to the game
to make it stand out rather than making it overly realistic. There is no bad ending here for anyone, because The Wind Waker did receive a true sequel on the Nintendo DS later called The Legend of Zelda Phantom Hourglass, which maintained the cartoonish art style of its original. Gateway to Homebrew. The Nintendo version of Twilight Princess has a buffer overflow vulnerability that gave birth to an exploit called the Twilight Hack. This hack allowed an execution of custom code from an SD card on the console with the use of a fake save file that would cause the game to load unofficial code. This code contained software in the ELF format, and that allowed users to run homebrew applications directly on the Wii console. Future Wii updates eventually stopped this from happening, and the vulnerability was patched out over time.
Maker. Yes, Rom? Remember to remind people to do the algorithm thing. Rom, they already know to like and subscribe and leave a comment. You are welcome. Ungrateful son of a...
Twilight Princess HD. The HD remaster of Twilight Princess has more than just better visuals. The GameCube version of the game's controls were carried onto the Wii U version gamepad, and certain tweaks were made which improved certain things like the underwater gameplay of the game. Some of the cutscenes were sped up, and things like collecting Tears of Light were reduced to avoid repetition. And lastly, the Wolf Link amiibo was created for the game that unlocked in-game content and could carry some of the data over to Breath of the Wild as well. There were also several other Zelda-related amiibos that were supported by the game, such as Link and Toon Link amiibos, which replenished arrows. Zelda and Sheik amiibos restored Link's health, and a Ganondorf amiibo that forces Link to take twice the amount of damage he would normally take. Cut content and issues. The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess has a bunch of cut and unused content, as well as some issues between the different versions as well. First of all, the Wii version of the game was rushed, so it could come out right alongside the console's release. As a result, it had a number of glitches and did not have the Canadian French and Latin American Spanish translations. These missing features and fixes were only applied with a patch in early 2007. There is a debug room that was accidentally left intact in the game. In the 1.0 release of the game, it can be accessed in the Cave of Ordeals by putting out the torches on a floor with the Gale Boomerang. That unlocks a lower floor, and it allows you to easily traverse the cave system without having to fight enemies. There is a conventional debug mode as well that can be accessed by manipulating the ISO file on the GameCube version of the game, which has several things that players can mess around with. A canon glitch in the basement of the sanctuary in Kakariko exists in version 1.0 of the Wii port. When you go there and Shad is present, save your game and quit. When you load back in, you will be permanently trapped in the room with no way out. The game warps Shad to the top of the stairs, and the game thinks he can still see you, which disables your ability to warp the cannon out. There are also two glitches based on warping. The first one is related to the underwater gameplay. In general, warping underwater is restricted, but due to a glitch, the map's screen warp button isn't disabled, and that allows you to warp underwater. Doing this under specific circumstances soft locks the game. The second one is a map glitch that makes it possible to interrupt Midna's warp sequence, and that disables several loading zones around the map. Although certain ways to do this were patched out, it's still one of the glitches that are possible even in some of the later revisions of the game, just through different methods. Furthermore, unrelated to warping, there's a glitch that allows you to reach a loading zone from the North Hyrule Field to Upper Zora's River in the North American Wii port of the game. Another glitch allows you to freeze the game while starting a Snow Peak surf race by standing next to Yito and hitting the leaf tree with the ball and chain. This causes Yito to initiate conversation about the race, but since the leaf falling cutscene gets interrupted by Yito, the game completely freezes. Then we have an Iron Boots glitch, where you can unequip the item just when Link is getting pulled towards a magnetic surface. This makes it possible to walk around as if Link is still wearing the boots, but at his normal speed. This glitch was fixed for most versions, but can still be pulled off in some of them. Lastly,
you can skip the postman cutscenes because the triggers for the postman are so little that you can just jump over them completely. Like most other glitches, this was eventually patched out. The game has a long list of unused content, some of which is still left inside the game's files. There are unused areas, such as the Throne Room folder, which has an area called Room 10, which has a unique Zant actor and a cutscene. Since the room is incomplete, you cannot interact with that character. Other unused rooms include a test area seemingly meant for the Darkhammer boss fight, a camp test area, and some text within the files implies that some map files were deleted from the final release of the game. Other than unused and deleted map files, there are a few models, pieces of music, sound effects, text, some cutscenes, and some animations that are completely unused or even deleted outright. Unfortunately, none of it seems to be particularly fleshed out. There's hardly any visual forms from this content. Most of it is only present and evident within text files. And speaking of text, a lot of dialogue in the game has been left unused, and all of it has been extracted by the fans over time. Distracting the big bad. You can distract the final boss when you fight him and get a few cheap hits in his moment of confusion. All that you need to do is cast the fishing rod. This will distract him for a few seconds, and you can get a bunch of hits in the process. Midna's speech. Midna speaks complete gibberish in the game. However, if her voice clips are extracted and placed together in the correct order, the phrases can be understood.
Which one will it be? Have you made up your mind? I'll take you there with my power. What do you think happened to those who try to rule with sacred magic? I have a request. Would you find a mirror? Don't go running off. I'll be watching. I guess you aren't stupid.
The voice lines are spoken by a Japanese voice actress called Akiko Kuwamoto and are recorded in English. Control the Kuko. In the majority of these Zelda games, if you hit the Kukos, you get attacked. However, in Twilight Princess, hitting Kukos is rewarded. All that you need to do is get 8 hits on the Kuko, and this will give you the ability to temporarily control it for a short time. Breath of the Wild Easter Egg. In the HD remaster of Twilight Princess, you can find screenshots of Breath of the Wild inside Chudley's Fine Good and Trinkets Emporium. At the time, the game was unnamed, but it was actively in development. Ilia and Link. Usually, the implied love interest for Link in every different timeline within the franchise happens to be Zelda. However, this time around, that character seems to be Ilia because the two of them grow up together, are very close, and Link is as motivated to rescue her as he is for rescuing the Ordon children, who are a central part of the game's story. However, relying solely on the game's narrative, it's unknown whether their relationship is indeed that of romance or just a platonic love and admiration. Accidental aid. One of the most infamous twists in the game's story is when, in an attempt to stop Link, Zant drives a shadow crystal into Link's forehead, and this locks him into his wolf form. But what he didn't expect was that soon afterwards, Wolf, Link, and Midna find the Master Sword, and its power removes the shard out of Link's forehead, which makes him a normal human being again. But that's not all. Midna realized that the shard, now separate from Link, can help him morph in and out of his wolf form at will. This proves to be a great upgrade for the hero, and is one of the key contributors to Link's victory against Zant and Ganondorf. Heroism prevails nonetheless in most fantasy tales, but the path may have been more difficult for Link were it not for Zant's stupidity. I'm the monster? If you change into the Wolf Link form and start to go around the Hyrule Castle, the townspeople will start screaming and run away from you in fear. Going into the town square eventually causes the castle guards to appear, but they will be too afraid of you as well, just like the average civilians. Attacking them will cause them to drop various items like hearts, rupees, and arrows, and hilariously, the postman will hunt you down to give Link his mail, no matter what, even if it's in his wolf form,
which makes no sense since the town people shouldn't be able to recognize him like that. This is most likely an oversight in the game's programming. Ilya's amnesia. One of the most commonly discussed theories for the Twilight Princess is related to Ilya's amnesia. The question of how she lost her memories just by being hit with an arrow comes up quite often, especially since it's not like the arrow hit her head or anything. Half of the fans say that the arrow that she was shot with was in fact poisonous, which eventually affected her brain. And the other half simply say that the amnesia can be caused by traumatic experiences, which includes other health-related things like strokes as well. So the physical and mental trauma she went through must have caused the memory loss. And last but not least, she fell into the fountain, which usually have rocks, so she might have hit her head there as well. There is no official explanation from Nintendo, so anything sounds plausible enough. The unnoticed barrier. People often wonder why the people in the Hyrule Castle town don't notice the barrier around the castle. Even the guards don't seem to be alarmed by this, and no one seems to notice the giant spider-like creature climbing on the barrier and destroying it either. It's theorized that the barrier is meant to be invisible to normal people, so they can't notice that something is wrong and freak out as a result of this. Some people in the town do seem to sense that something is wrong, like how Goron mentions that the air around the castle feels funny, and someone in the marketplace mentions that it's odd that Princess Zelda hasn't made any public appearances. But all of these are speculations, and the civilians just seem to be kept in darkness, possibly through magic rather than brainwash of any kind. Midna's awareness. One of the darkest theories about the game is how little Midna seems to care about the fact that the shadow beings Link kills throughout the game were once just innocent members of the Twilight. However, it's implied in the game that people from Hyrule can be turned into Twilight creatures as well. So Midna might just know that these shadow beings are from Hyrule and does not care about people that aren't hers. But then this means that Link is killing his countrymen instead, and doesn't seem to be affected by it. But there's an explanation for that as well. The hero of A Link to the Past kills mind-controlled knights, so Link generally doesn't seem to care much about killing possessed people. Lastly, some people believe they are indeed Midna's people, but it would have just made the game too dark if she constantly seemed depressed about it. She knows that killing them is necessary, so she doesn't make a big deal out of it and lets Link do his job. While we may never see a true sequel to Twilight Princess, it remains near the top of many players' favorite Zelda games, and it serves as a benchmark for what kind of games Nintendo can create when they are allowed to veer outside of their comfortable PG bubble. Like and subscribe to see more videos like this, and let us know what topics we should cover next. For the first 12 installments, The Legend of Zelda has been a vibrant, lighthearted, and cartoony franchise, but for their 13th game, Nintendo opted for a much more realistic, darker, and mature Zelda title. The first and only Zelda title to be rated T for teen on the ESRB and ages 12 and up by the PEGI rating system for containing scenes of animated blood and fantasy violence. And for the first time ever, the states received a Zelda console game before Japan. This is The Legend of Zelda: Twilight Princess Iceberg. The beginning and the end. Twilight Princess was originally going to be a GameCube exclusive only. However, it was delayed by Nintendo so that the developers have enough time to refine it, add a few more things to it, and then port it to the Nintendo Wii as well. The game...
Deja vu.
This beloved game series practically set the standard for action-adventure games. Let's acknowledge one of the titles that set the foundation for the franchise. The game that took the series from being good to great, with a host of new elements that we still see used today. This is The Legend of Zelda: A Link to the Past Iceberg. laying the groundwork. Many of the staples that we've seen throughout the Zelda franchise were introduced or cemented in this title. Let's start with some of the core features for the foundation solidified in this game. First and foremost, the legend of the franchise culminated within this game. Find 3 core items, attain the Master Sword, experience the major plot twist, gather additional items, then defeat the final boss. This core formula of the series was repeated many times throughout the Zelda games. We also saw a general shift in this game, with much more puzzle-oriented gameplay, rather than mostly action, adventure, and exploration. Beyond the lore and structure of the game, we see other franchise staples in this game as well. Dungeon-specific keys, pieces of hearts to increase your health pool, Kukos, the Master Sword, the grappling hook, the Pegasus boots, the ping-pong boss battle mechanic, and more. We also see the introduction of the Knights of Hyrule, who would be a recurring group of characters within the series. Another interesting addition to the game is the animation and victory fanfare that's played when Link acquires a new item. He holds the item proudly above his head, sharing his finds with the player. There is even a little moment where a merchant explains that Link should always do this, as it's good for business. This is also the first time within the series that we see the iconic Zelda logo, with a title in front of a sword and shield. The Japanese cover of the game didn't feature this, instead opting for a Triforce behind the title. Nevertheless, we saw several variants and inspirations from this logo throughout future entries of the series. Musical legend. Another of this game's greatest introductions was 2 of its most famous songs, the overworld theme, and Zelda's Lullaby. Both of these, and various renditions of them, would go on to be extensively used within the series. The first prequel. This is the 3rd Zelda game to be created, but according to the official Zelda timeline, it's actually a prequel to the first 2 games. Upon first hearing the title of the game, many people assumed the game would feature time travel, but the clever pun featured within the title actually just refers to the past timeline that the game would take place in. A second world. Another staple addition first seen in the series is a second world to explore, that the player must discover and traverse through in order to complete the game. This eventually becomes a concept that's revisited several times throughout the franchise, although it's not necessarily in the same manner as Link to the Past, with its light and dark worlds. The death counter. This was definitely a product of its era, with games being generally more challenging and difficult. The credits of the game will display all of your deaths in each dungeon before displaying a grand total. The game obviously counts your deaths against this tally, but each time you save and quit, it also applies toward this counter. So in order to get a perfect 0 deaths, you need to complete the game without dying, in a single extended play session. Awkward adolescence. Although many of the game's aspects became future staples of the series, many things would serve as a lesson to be learned from, promptly being removed after this game. The 7 sages are referred to as the 7 wise men. The Hylians were also simply referred to as Hylia, taking a page out of Mario's universe. Certain enemies are actually Hyruleans, who have been placed under a Dark World curse due to their evil nature. This is one of the only instances in the series that the essence of the Triforce actually speaks to Link in the end of the game. The Master Sword is also treated differently in this game. Its base level is unable to damage the final boss with its default attack. It can also be tempered twice by dwarven swordsmiths and a great fairy, whereas other games typically require divine intervention. And up until Breath of the Wild, its golden form was the most powerful sword in the series. And speaking of the dwarven race, this is their only appearance within the franchise. They would eventually be replaced by the Gorons. The unkillable annoyance. There is a thief in the forest that will occasionally attempt to rob you of your valuables. When your character is attacked, several of your items will drop around you. The thief will attack you and eventually attempt to grab your dropped valuables. When you try to punish the little deviant, you'll find that it's invulnerable, preventing it from ever receiving the justice it may have deserved. Another nuisance is the first appearance of the Wallmaster, that will drop from the top of the screen in Skull Woods. While the monster is killable, it will quickly get replaced by another. Another addition to the franchise was the pitfall traps. Falling into these traps will typically return you to a previous area, losing half a heart in the process. However, we'll go over a special pitfall trap later in the video. The flute is not a flute. The graphic for the item more closely resembles an ocarina. While some people believe this to be a simple translation error, others believe that this item just served as the inspiration for later appearances. The rarest sword. At one point in the game, you can upgrade the tempered sword into the strongest weapon in the game, the golden sword. It's said to be the only sword that can damage Ganon with its base attack. However, what's most special about this sword is that it's the only time in the franchise that a golden sword is used. A second villain. This is the first time in the series that we see a red herring for the final boss. Aghanim was set up to be the final boss according to the game's story. It's a point of debate as to the relation between Aghanim and Ganon. In the English version, it's implied that Aghanim is another version of Ganon, or is simply a split part of his soul. However, the animation of Aghanim's defeat, and the Japanese version, suggests that he is a completely separate entity from Ganon, that's under some form of possession. No pants. If you examine the game's official artwork, you can actually see that young Link is not wearing any form of pants or tights under his tunic, although it's been confirmed through the manga that he is indeed wearing underwear, shorts, or briefs. Also, the artwork shows Link as having a darker blonde hair. However, Link's in-game sprite features a more pink hue color to his hair. One theory for this is that it's due to color palette limitations within the game. When Link turns into a bunny, the color was essential. Other people insist that it's simply as an easier way for the color to visually stand out. The color may have been necessary to change due to the character sprite and the rest of the game's backgrounds. Size matters. This game in particular is notorious for having a small hitbox range for the starter sword. Throughout most of the successor games within the series, the sword's hitbox tends to stay mostly consistent with an adequate range. Being in line with the difficulty level of many games in this time, this short sword range granted one of the more notable challenges in an early game, as it forced players to get very close to enemies. Luckily, the range was increased to a more manageable distance when you acquire the Master Sword. Secrets and such. There are a number of hidden secrets within the game. They range from fairly well known, like the Kuko Attack Swarm, to once-in-a-lifetime rewards, immortalizing one lucky magazine reader in 1990. There is a portrait of Mario found in a home. Pulling on it will cause a number of rupees to burst out. There's another reference to Mario games with the addition of the Chain Chomps and Turtle Rock. You can also find a Kuko hidden underneath a pot in a house. If you sprinkle magic dust on it, the Kuko turns into a woman. She explains that the weather-vane Kuko in the middle of town is always watching you, and she also expresses her desire to return back to being a Kuko. When the two blacksmiths are hammering your sword, if you join in with your own hammer, they will express to you that amateurs shouldn't interfere with their work. In an early volume of Nintendo Power, they issued a contest whereby players could compete. The players were challenged to send in a picture of the elusive war mech from the original Final Fantasy game. The winner was given their very own named room within the game, complete with a plaque that cemented them in gaming history. Parallel Worlds. This is a special game mod that more serves as a complete fan overhaul. Additions include new graphics, music, an entirely new overworld and underworld, a day and night system, and a new storyline. The mod has received mostly positive reception, with many people remarking on the high level of difficulty and challenge. Censored title. Like most other Nintendo games of its time, the game was censored during its localization to Western audiences, many of which are related around religious contexts. Some changes include the delete save file option originally being called kill instead of delete. The priests are renamed sages. The church is renamed to a sanctuary, and symbols containing hexagrams were changed to a strange symbol. And perhaps the largest censorship of all is the title of the Japanese game, Triforce of the Gods. This also contributes to the game's sequel, A Link Between Worlds, which is more appropriately named Triforce of the Gods 2. Plot holes. There exists at least two debated plot holes within this game. The first is the flute. You can't normally use the flute in the Dark World, but conveniently enough, after the second fight with Aghanim, Link is able to use the flute to call the bird. The second major plot hole is based around the lore of the game, that states that the light arrows are required to defeat Ganon. However, players have found a way to bypass this requirement. By spinning the sword at a specific time after Ganon begins to teleport, you can damage him, regardless of stunning him via a silver arrow. Link's family. In most games, we see little to no mention of Link's family. However, this is one of the few games that directly involves one of his kin. Link's uncle makes an appearance as an early guide and teacher to the protagonist. Although in the manga adaptations of the games, we see some additional references to his parents, and we find out that they have somehow found their way into the Dark World, forcing Link to become under the care of his uncle. It is interesting to note that the other members of his family are all Knights of Hyrule. Paradox Cave. There exists an area in Death Mountain that contains a special pitfall trap. To reach this area, you must enter the lower right corner of Hyrule's Death Mountain. When you enter this pit, you will ironically land in front of a cave that's actually higher up topographically on the map. This aptly named Paradox Cave is a popular location to check for progression during randomizer play sessions. And for those who don't know, randomizers are mods that shuffle the location of all the important items of the game, making the game even more challenging. The Golden Realm. This is said to be the resting place of the Triforce. It was renamed to the Golden Land upon localization. In the instruction manual, we can see some art of what it supposedly looks like. The art displays floating land masses and a golden sun with a Triforce inside of it. Although the lore within the game actually states that no one actually knows what the Golden World looked like before Ganon corrupted it. And even more ironic is that this was the only artwork that displayed the Golden Realm in this manner. Later titles in the series show it to be a beautiful, lush world that appears not much different than Hyrule itself. The manual's inconsistencies. While we're on the subject of the game's manual, let's point out the translation additions. When the game was being localized, the translators took the liberty of adding some additional texts. While these are appreciated at the time, it would later create several inconsistencies within the story and lore for later titles. Many of these were simply verbiage and contextual changes that set different tones and situations throughout. I'll put a link down below for those who want to further look into it. Magical telepathy. This game, and a few others in the series, show Zelda, Link, and several other entities to possess a form of telepathy. The source of this is never fully explained. Some have theorized characters who have wielded the Triforce pieces innately gain this trait. Others suggest that it's a simple magical ability that can be learned within their universe. In any case, it doesn't seem to be only protagonists or Hylians, as Ganondorf has been shown to possess the ability as well. Let us know if you have any theories on this. The adaptations. There are 3 different adaptations of this game in print form. The first was a Western comic adaptation that was initially serialized in Nintendo Power. It was eventually published in graphic novel form, and later translated into Japanese. And although it was created by a manga artist, it's technically not considered manga. There were, however, 2 different manga adaptations for the game. The first was released in 1995. The second was released in 2005. None of these adaptations are said to be officially canon. Uncle's last words. In each of the translations for Link's uncle's final words, were left hanging mid-sentence. In the English version it reads, "Zelda is your blank." The Japanese version is equally puzzling, as it instead reads, "You are the princesses, blank." Some translations, such as the Spanish version, simply omit the phrase entirely. In these instances, it's possible that the translators were unsure of its meaning and felt it best to remove the text. And in future GBA versions, the text was modified to more properly express the request of saving Zelda, though some fans have still speculated on some further meanings behind this cliffhanger. One theory suggests it was meant to read something akin to Star Wars.
Help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope.
You are Zelda's only hope. Others have theorized that there were originally plans to have them be relatives of some kind, perhaps siblings, cousins, or family of some kind. Zelda and Link's relationship is never explicitly stated throughout the franchise, so the notion of the 2 being siblings is not out of the realm of possibility. Some even suggest that the evidence for them being siblings is strengthened in Ocarina of Time. In OOT, Link's mother delivered him to the Deku Tree when he was just a baby, and she died shortly after, because we never see Zelda's mother either. Some have speculated that this suggests Link and Zelda may have the same mother. Early dialogue from Zelda in the game speak about how Link seems familiar to her, which only further fuels the notion. Is it possible that Zelda and Link are siblings, separated at birth? While A Link to the Past may not be the #1 Zelda game of all time, it helped to solidify the Zelda franchise in Nintendo's arsenal. This game walked so its successors could run, and there's no end in sight for this gaming giant. Like and subscribe if you want to see more videos like this, and let me know what subjects you want to see covered in the comments below. Perhaps the most immersive Star Wars experience to date, Knights of the Old Republic started as a comic book and ended as a critically acclaimed RPG series that has earned the anticipated remake on the horizon. With a vast, engrossing, and epic story, complete with force powers and lightsabers, you choose your path down the light side or the dark side. This is the Knights of the Old Republic iceberg. Revan's identity. In the Star Wars Legends, formerly known as the Extended Universe, There existed a Jedi Knight who broke away from the Jedi Order to become a powerful Dark Lord of the Sith. This individual would go on to form a Sith Empire. However, the Sith Lord experienced amnesia and was retrained as a Jedi Knight to fight alongside the Sith Empire. In KOTOR, we come to find out that we play as this character.
Are you trying to say
What greater weapon is there than to turn an enemy to your cause, to use their own knowledge against them?
I'm Darth Revan?
Mullet Man. This is the default character design template for the game. Due to its preset selection and its dashing good looks, the Mullet Man has become somewhat of a notorious meme within the community, with many players choosing the default Mullet Man as their preferred character design, ironically. References to the movies. There are a number of different direct references and Easter eggs relating to the movie. If you purchase a droid in Terrace, he will immediately explode just like it happened with Luke in A New Hope. In one situation, you're being tortured by Saul Kareth, and you'll be given an option to answer a question in a lie that states, Alderaan, it's on Alderaan, whereas Princess Leia says,
Dantooine. They're on Dantooine.
There are also a number of subtle references throughout various pieces of countless dialogues. Some mention Palpatine and Jango Fett, along with several others hidden throughout.
Are you an angel?
What?
An angel.
Are you an angel? Ah, I'm just kidding. That's the worst line I've ever used. Hope some poor kid doesn't start using it.
Restored Content Mod. This is the most popular mod for the KOTOR games. It implements much of the content that was cut from the original game due to its time constraints. The goal for this mod is to create the game as close to the experience that the game creators originally wanted us to experience. There are pages and pages of changes to the game, improving upon and adding to it substantially. Player canonical name. In the first game, we learn that we are canonically Darth Revan. In the second game, the canonical name for the character is a woman named Mitra Surik, who can be seen as a Force ghost in the Old Republic MMO. Origin of Sith and Jedi codes. These exist as a set of codes and mantras by which these beings live and die by. In general, the Jedi advocate for peace, knowledge, serenity, and harmony, whereas the Sith code advocates for violence as a tool and means for attaining freedom and power. The Sith and Jedi codes that are present throughout the first game are adaptations of the Buddhist philosophies. Mandalore Identity. This is actually one of your companions from the first game that assists you throughout your journey. Even after Revan revealed his true identity, the companion remained completely loyal, stating he was proud to serve alongside such a strong warrior. The companion's name was Canderous Ordo. He would go on to become known as Mandalore the Preserver from the second game. Speedy Astronaut. During the spacewalk in the Paragus mining facility in KOTOR 2, you can cast Force Speed before exiting to space to have a speedy character throughout this entire segment of the game. This was a bug in the original game that was actually fixed in our cut content mod. Revan's Armor. This was a special suit of armor that can be discovered and unlocked near the end of the game. There are two different versions of the armor, one for light side alignment and one for dark side. They require you to exist within that alignment to wear it and acquire the stat bonuses it provides your character with. Gender playthrough differences. You receive different dialogue options and responses from various characters depending on your choice between male or female. As a female, you will occasionally see more sexist or flirting dialogue from NPCs, including your companions. Aperion. This was a beloved fan project whereby the complete game of KOTOR was being attempted to be recreated entirely in Unreal Engine 4. This was not a mod in the sense of changing certain things. This was a rebuilding from the ground up with a completely revamped look and feel. It was also receiving a revamp in the AI and quality of life features as well. The project was in development for 2 to 3 years. However, when they were just months away from finishing the game, they received a cease and desist from Lucasfilm in late 2018. The development team and the community at large tried their best to reason with them, but it was to no avail and the project was sadly left unfinished. Luckily, we have a new project called Unreal Cinema that's in the works that seems to be doing something fairly similar. KOTOR 3 cancellation. This game was almost in its developmental stages, but it was cancelled due to a number of difficulties LucasArts was experiencing. Designer John Stafford is on record saying, "We got quite a bit of traction. We wrote a story. We designed most of the environments and worlds, and most of the quests, characters, and items. The third installment was said to follow Revan into the battle with the ancient Sith Lords, who are far more terrifying than the Darths that we are familiar with. These Sith Lords would just be monsters. They also wanted to give us a glimpse into their psychologies, personalities, history, and the range of force powers they employ to rule over the galaxy that they reside in." Kandris' War Stories. There is a dialogue option with Kandris where he shares an experience where he had fired his weapons at what he thought was a frozen asteroid. But when he was shooting at it, the asteroid suddenly came to life, threw out projectiles, and took off beyond the edge of the galaxy.
It started rotating faster and faster as we watched it. After a second, it started spraying fire, thermal projectiles that melted our armor like wax. We were caught completely by surprise.
Some have speculated that it was a coral skipper or part of a living, sentient world known as the Zonama Sakat. However, the most widely accepted potentially canonical answer is that it was Yuzang Vong. Canonical head and gender. As we've discussed, the canon gender for the player in KOTOR 2 is a female named Mitra Surik. The canon head and face for the character is not even in the game by default, however you can use a mod that will add it in the game for you to play. Opposite gender playthrough differences. Just like the differences in KOTOR 1, the second game offers a host of different dialogue options, but they also offer a different companion depending on your chosen gender. Males receive the handmaiden and females receive the disciple, although it is worth mentioning that according to canon, Mitra Surik still gets a handmaiden despite being a female. Dance Dance Malik. There is a process by which you can enable cheats in your game. For PC, you need to edit a file in your game folder and type this code into the in-game console. For console systems, there are a series of button inputs that must be put into all controllers into the system. These methods will unlock an ending cutscene whereby the player turns Darth Malak into a Twi'lek that dances with you momentarily before the normal end of the game, be it light or dark. Kreia YouTube documentaries. Kreia was a blind, force-sensitive, human female Jedi Master who counseled Revan as her former Padawan. She created a new Jedi Order with a vision of freeing sentient beings from enslavement. However, in her noble pursuit, she fell victim to the dark side and submitted herself to it, eventually becoming the Sith Lord Darth Treya. This YouTuber has created a series of videos going vastly in depth on the unconventional and controversial character. From psychology to her capabilities to her skills and mindsets and much more. There are hours worth of content going deep into this character and everything about her. Slaharion. This was a planet and area that was originally planned to be included in KOTOR 1. It would have served as one of the destinations where the player would discover ancient star maps essential for the progression in the game. It was cut from the game for various reasons, however some official screenshots were released while in its production that show what the environment would have looked like. You can also find 2 music files that currently exist within the game that have been theorized to serve as the background music for the Rakatan Mine Trap segment and the fights aboard the Starforge. There have been efforts made by modders to restore this planet to the game, but have never made it to completion. Third playthrough differences. This is not necessarily a third playthrough so much as it is a playthrough after experiencing both the light and the dark side routes. If you have defeated both sides of the game, your following playthrough will unlock several changes in dialogue throughout the game. Some notable changes include this extra dialogue with the Handmaiden. Atton in Jedi Academy. Another dialogue that becomes available during the third playthrough is from Atton that breaks the fourth wall, discussing the character's involvement with another game.
I'm Atton. I actually wasn't supposed to make it into the final game, but I was created at the last minute. blame my agent. I was actually slated for a spin-off to Jedi Knight, but I don't want to talk about what happened there.
What happens after the ending? The outcome of the ending in KOTOR 2 will vary greatly depending on the choices you've made throughout your
Getting
playthrough.
close on this one.
And the
I'm
vexing
going to
ending
take a little
cinematics
break
often leave players
and then
confused,
come back.
with much left to be answered. It is left fairly open-ended, but many
I'm getting there. Oops. do. Right now I'm attempting to make a dark color that matches the other two. So we'll see what that looks like. First I'm just going to use whatever they've already established as a dark color. Be right back. I am back. So, let's see what we got here. So right now what I'm doing is I'm doing the shadow work on them. I pretty much pulled the color from Lucy from that screenshot, but for her shadows, but for her is a little more difficult, so I just made up a new palette for her, which I'm going to still adjust. Alright, let's go back to listening to this thing.
Many of Krea's dialogues will offer clues as to the future of the characters and the lore in general, but much of the future is foretold through other sources. In essence, the light side is canonical, and your companions that have been trained as Jedi will begin their own Jedi Order. Your character, Mitra Surik, an effort to deal with the Sith Empire. They were only successful in delaying them. These events can be detailed further in the novel Revan, and 300 years after this, the Sith Empire invades as the events of Star Wars The Old Republic begin. Zalbar cloning. This is a rare bug where Zalbar the Wookiee can be cloned and duplicated multiple times, sometimes even replacing other companions entirely. You can only have 2 of them in your party, and in some rare cases, players have reported seeing upwards of 20 Zalbar clones roaming on their ship. Galaxy Droid. This is an Xbox glitch that can occur through a series of precise steps and actions. The setup is somewhat tedious, but upon completion, you will be greeted with the Galaxy Droid that will instantly transport you to any planet in the game. This is clearly not meant to be there, as certain choices will completely crash the game, leave you stranded on a planet with no way of escaping, or leave you unable to survive at all. However, as soon as you leave the Ebon Hawk, the Galaxy Droid is no longer accessible. It is theorized that this was once actually a dev tool that somehow made it into the game. General Restoration Content Mods. Just like the KOTOR 2 restored content mods, KOTOR 1 has its own version, though this mod never became quite as popular, as much of the cut content was done in good manner as it disrupted the flow of the game, making it less enjoyable for many. Mission Vow Original Gender. Mission Vow is one of your companions throughout the game that is accompanied by Zalbar. Early concept art of the character reveals that it was originally planned to be a male Twi'lek instead of a female. It's been theorized that the Mission and Zalbar duo is a tribute to Han Solo and Chewbacca. Perhaps the designers wanted to distinguish between the two duos and made Mission female instead. Another interesting similarity between Han Solo and Mission is that Mission's in-game class is Scoundrel, which is what Princess Leia originally called Han Solo.
When you aren't acting like a scoundrel.
And another obvious allusion is Mission's line, "I have a bad feeling about this."
I got a bad feeling about this.
Voice pitch Easter egg. Just like in the Dance Dance Malik cheat, you can utilize multiple controllers across the console to adjust the pitch of the characters' voices in KOTOR 1. You can make the pitch higher.
Talk about what? The only thing I want to do right now is find Dustin.
Or lower.
Talk about what? The only thing I want to do.
Chris Avalone endorsement. In 2013, the lead designer of KOTOR 2, Chris Avellone, went on record with Eurogamer to acknowledge and praise the efforts of the Sith Lord's restored content mod for the game, saying, quote, "I have a lot of respect for the mod team, and I'm glad it can see the light of day. Those guys should have been given a lot of kudos for their hard work, so for anyone who plays the restored content and enjoys it, let other fans know and give credit where it's due." How much content was really cut? The developers were deep in the process of brainstorming and writing for the game when they were told from the higher-ups that they had 9 months to finish the game. They were forced to eliminate many of the grander ideas that unfortunately never made it to the point that they could have been cut from the game. We may never know what these original grander ideas would encompass. Darth Nihilus unedited recordings. Did you ever hear the tragedy of Darth Nihilus the Hungry? It's not a story a Jedi would tell you. It's a Sith legend. Darth Nihilus was a Dark Lord of the Sith, so powerful that he existed beyond the need for a body to exist within our physical realm. He would siphon the very soul from beings around him and quite literally feed himself to death. He bound his soul to his mask, allowing him to exist within our realm without a physical body. The original, unedited recordings of him are horrifying and very fitting for such a wicked being.
All life exists simply to sacrifice itself to me, to feed my power.
Sith Code Origins in Mein Kampf. As mentioned earlier, the Sith Code is mostly just a reversal of the Jedi Code. However, David Gator, who was tasked with creating the Sith Code, has stated that the Sith philosophy was at least partially inspired by Mein Kampf, the infamous manifesto written by Adolf Hitler. Bastila is a Sunrider. Bastila was originally planned to be a different character named Vima Sunrider, who now exists in Legends. Thon and Nomi Sunrider were her masters, and Vima would also eventually take on Mitra Surik as her apprentice. However, due to trademark issues during the creation of KOTOR, the developers needed to switch around some names with other existing party members at the time, and Bastila became the character we know now. What happens between KOTOR 1 and 2? The massive Jedi civil war between the Republic and the Empire ended only slightly in favor of the Republic. However, they still suffered tremendous losses. Revan chose to seek the true Sith Empire, leaving the Republic and his family to lose their momentum and initiative. The war massacred the Jedi on both sides, and there were said to be barely 100 Jedi left alive by the end of the war. The galaxy has been left in shambles, left only to recover after the devastation, while both the Jedi and the Sith quietly disappeared. Public perception of all Force users turned into a blatant hatred, viewing both light and dark side as equally destructive. Cut ending. This is in reference to a female dark side ending where you romance Karth throughout the game. At the end of the game, Karth tries to convince you of one final act of redemption. He suggests for you to eliminate Bastila and her battle meditation aura to allow the Republic to destroy the Starforge. He states that even though they won't have time to escape, their sacrifice to destroy the Starforge would be worth it. Revan tries to reason with Bastila, but she refuses, forcing the player to destroy her. Then Karth and Revan essentially go down with the ship while confessing their eternal love for one another. The final cutscene shows Vandar, the Yoda species member, pointing out their absence. True ending. In the new Essential Chronology book, it is established Revan's kin and gender as male with the light side ending. Krea's identity. We learned that RNK was one of the masters that Revan held as a Padawan. It was assumed that she died during the Mandalorian Wars, though no body was ever found. Many people believe that RNK is actually Krea, as both of them are said to have trained Revan. It's also worth noting that the name Krea also seems to be a combination of her light and dark names put together. And even the lead designer, Chris Avellone, said in response to the theory, "Can't comment, but good catch. Sorry." Despite all the evidence, there has not been any confirmation on this theory as of yet. Krea's teachings. Not surprisingly, with all the Buddhist and Eastern philosophies that the Force is based on, Many of the philosophies of Star Wars are very valuable lessons that can be applicable to our own lives. But in particular, Krea's teachings can be perhaps the most valuable, as she incorporates a balance between the Sith and the Jedi. She points out that the Jedi have its flaws with their non-attachment and a general disconnection from what makes us human. Jedi Knights are forbidden of any kind of attachment, romantic or otherwise. This goes against our very nature of connection, making us lose our humanity in exchange for the greater good. Whereas the Sith have their own flaws in their hunger and ultimate drive for power. This ultimately leads them to destroy everything, including themselves in their own greed. Krea seems to be more balanced, understanding the benefits of duality, harnessing our passions for growth and development while not letting the pursuit destroy our lives in the process. Kurta's contact. Kurta was a miner at the Paragus mining facility in KOTOR 2. This theory postulates that Kurta was in contact with Atton to try and smuggle the exile to Nar Shaddaa for the bounty. We're not given any indicators as to how or why Atton was in the holding cell, and with the background such as his, it's not out of line for the Jedi to be docile long enough to collect the bounty. Carth is force sensitive. This theory holds some water to it with several bits of evidence. Carth is a very skilled pilot, which is not necessarily indicative in itself, but it can help, just like Anakin being such a skilled pod racer, even at an early age. At Endar Spire, Carth was able to catch on to something deeper occurring within your last-minute transfer. Carth was also the only non-Jedi character to react to Ajunta spirit in the tomb. We also come to find out that Carth's son Dustil is confirmed to be force sensitive, even being trained on Korriban. And we already know that force sensitivity runs in families. And when Carth finds out about this, he doesn't even seem surprised. Everything seems to point to Carth actually being force sensitive.
Looking to capitalize on the success of Super Mario RPG, Shigeru Miyamoto attempted to reinvent its style, and by keeping the same combat mechanics, but establishing a new type of animation, the world received one of the most beloved entries in the Mario franchise. This is the Paper Mario Iceberg. Familiar tune. Waiting an additional 10 seconds after the jingle that plays on the chapter title cards will cause a complete version of the Super Mario Bros. Theme song to start playing. 8-bit throwback. In Boo Mansion, if the player goes to the door across the hall from the entrance and jumps in the jar inside of it, Mario will come out of the jar looking like his original 8-bit sprite from Super Mario Bros. Paper Mario Color Splash Leak. On September 22nd of 2016, a playable version of the entire game was accidentally made accessible to those who preloaded it 2 weeks before its intended release date. Nintendo of America quickly took down the preload file within hours of its discovery. Paper Mario 64 on the DD. Initially, the game was going to be developed exclusively for the 64 disk drive, an add-on for the Nintendo 64. However, the 64DD was delayed several times, and rather than wait for the developers, they decided instead to concentrate on a cartridge version. The 64DD was finally released in late 1999, however it was only released in Japan, but by that time many of the proposed games had already moved over to the 64 base, and less than 10 games were ever released for the add-on. The Spiked Rollers. In Paper Mario the Origami King, there is one room inside of Bowser's castle that contains weapons used by the spikes, their spike balls, and their spiked rollers from Super Mario 3D World. While origami spikes in this game can spit up and throw spike balls, the rollers are never seen. Despite this, there's a dummied out model associated with them that depicts this same roller. Hidden Luigi sprites. Under the Smash Attack mini game room, there are 10 unused Luigi sprites. Since the minigame has Mario searching boxes for 10 portraits of Princess Peach, it's possible that the game's goal was originally to find Luigi in the boxes 10 times, and the developers simply forgot to remove the Luigi sprites. Cooper Kiss Glitch. It is possible to get your partner Cooper to give Mario a kiss with a glitch in the Ice Palace chapter. During a puzzle that requires the player to discover the real Bombette amidst several imposters, the player can leave the room and re-enter it by clipping through a wall. Upon re-entering, you will have changed your partner to Cooper. Cooper will then kiss Mario upon solving the puzzle, instead of Bombette as intended. Doing this with partners other than Cooper causes the game to crash instead. Unused dinos. An enemy known as Albino Dino appear as statues in the Crystal Palace. However, they are never actually fought. They can still be fought using Game Shark codes, and Goombario actually has tattle dialogue for them. They only have one attack, a charging ram that damages Mario. Early Luigi's Mansion references. Luigi keeps his diary in a secret basement under his and Mario's house. If you manage to read the entries, you can find one entry that reveals Luigi is actually afraid of ghosts, and another where he says he wants to have the lead role in his own adventure. These diary entries are referencing Luigi's Mansion, which was also in development at the time. In Thousand Year Door, one of the crows in Twilight Town talks about opening a real estate website called Luigi's Mansion, but his friend warns him against it in case of possible copyright infringement. He also mentions times when we used to play golf and tennis and have parties. These are references to Mario Golf, Mario Tennis, and Mario Party. 416 year-long item hunt. In dry desert north of Colorado's camp, you can find a yellow brick which, when hit multiple times, will reveal 3 hidden question mark blocks, which subsequently give you a shroom, 1 hit, super shroom, 10 hits, and ultra shroom at 100 hits. This block keeps track of how many times you hit it and has a maximum unsigned 4-byte value of 4,294,967,294, which means that hitting it more than that amount would reset the blocks and spawn them over the existing ones, allowing you to get the shrooms again. And this would actually take 36.3 years to reach. And hitting the block again that many times would reset it again, causing the blocks to spawn over the existing ones. Continuously repeating the process until the game freezes would take just over 416 years to achieve. The Other Ninja Turtles. The Koopa Brothers are an obvious reference to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Both the Koopa Brothers and the Teenage Turtles are turtles that wear bandanas around their heads. The Koopa Brothers also speak in skater slang, similar to the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Spiritual sequel. After a falling out with Square, the developers of the Final Fantasy series, and then developers of Super Mario RPG 2, Nintendo renamed Paper Mario to Mario RPG 64, and then to Super Mario Adventure. After that, they renamed the game Mario Story before picking the final name of Paper Mario. Interestingly, the name Mario Story stuck in Japan. A true sequel to Super Mario RPG has never been officially produced. Demo Shenanigans. 2 miscellaneous files have been found in the code of Thousand Year Door. They say, "Ha, I'm not telling you my secrets at the show. Wait for the final version." These were used as an E3 demo and cannot be found in the multi-game demo disc for the GameCube. The Berserk Status. There's an unused badge in the game's code called the Power of Rage. This badge is fully functional and can be worn if hacked into Mario's inventory. When Mario wears it, he takes on an angry pose during battles and becomes much stronger, and you can't control his actions, similar to the Berserk status in many RPGs. Wherefore art thou, Admiral Bomberry? In Origami King, if you inspect the steering wheel of the Princess Peach cruise ship while Bobby the Bob-Omb is next to Mario, he will remark how he once dreamed of being a captain or an admiral. This is a reference to Admiral Bobbery, Mario's partner from Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door. Mario and the Beanstalk parody. In the 6th chapter, Mario has to help the flowers in Flower Fields
in order to get a magical bean, fertile soil, and miracle water. He then uses these 3 items to grow a giant beanstalk that takes him to Cloudy Climb, high above the flower fields, where the chapter boss resides. Instant game overs. In Super Paper Mario, there are occasions where choosing the wrong choice will result in an instant game over. These are found near the end of the game. Dementio will ask you to join his side to take down Count Bleck. If you say yes 4 times, he will enslave the characters and you will get a game over. There is also one near the beginning of the game. Merlin tells you to take the pure heart and save all worlds from destruction. If you say no 3 times, you will also get a game over. Double Sun Dilemma. When in Dry Desert, take a close look at the background during a battle. The sun is crossing it slowly, but before it goes down on the right, another one is already rising to the left, meaning 2 suns can be seen in the sky simultaneously. Can I use this chimney? In Shiver City, Mario needs to find Herringway for part of a quest at the start of Chapter 7. Entering his house reveals a seemingly empty room, but if he goes onto the roof of the house and falls down the chimney, he enters Herringway's secret home area where he can be spoken to. Player's Foresight. To meet Mustafa in Dry Outpost, you have to buy a dried shroom and dusty hammer in the shop. You're supposed to learn this by giving a lemon to Sheik, but if you buy the items beforehand, the shopkeeper lampshades how lucky you are to have stumbled into the correct solution. Mustafa will raise an eyebrow at your mysterious knowledge. Calming down Yoshi's parents. In Chapter 5, the 5 Yoshi kids go missing, leading to mass panic within the village. Each time you rescue one child, you can go back to the village and discover that their parent, which has the same color, has calmed down and now has a unique dialogue with you. Mario cannot lose. During the fight against Kami Koopa at the finale, when you use Twink and Peach, we can find out that it's purely scripted, so you can not only not lose, you can't even select options that aren't related to winning. The only thing that keeps it from being a cutscene is that you need to do the inputs yourself. Putting the odds into your favor. Winning the in-game Happy Lucky Lottery in Thousand Year Door does not depend on luck at all, but rather on the date that you purchased the ticket based on the GameCube's internal clock. The following are the prizes. The 4th prize is between days 4 and 10. 3rd prize is between 25 and 35. The 2nd prize is between 85 and 115 days. And the first reward is between 335 and 395. If you set the system's clock back a day and then return to chat to Lucky, the lottery's manager, he'll notice that the internal clock has been interfered with. You can either admit to it or claim you did not tamper with it, but you'll have to spend 500 coins to do so. Daylight savings is not put into account. Buying a new ticket won't actually increase your chances of winning either, but will instead reset the days back from 0 when you bought it. Getting caught as a Koopa Troll. In the Chapter 6 event during the intermission, if the player times the sneaky parasol item at the exact frame when the Koopa Troll spots Princess Peach, she herself will become a Koopa Troll, but they will still treat her as Peach, resulting in them taking her back to her room while she is in disguise. This also works on a Hammer Brother in the library. This is caused by a lack of landing sprite for the Koopa Troll. Toadception. A Toad in the level Petal Meadows will discuss his top video games. He'll begin by discussing Fire Emblem for the Game Boy Advance, and later on he'll discuss Paper Mario for the N64. Finally, he'll reveal how he's now playing Paper Mario: The Thousand Year Door despite being in the game itself, and that the game's ending is worth playing through. Super Paper Mario Origins. This game was originally going to be released exclusively for the GameCube before being moved to the Wii. The evidence exists in this game's data, as there is a folder which contains GameCube rendered models of characters like Mario and Princess Peach. The Wii textures are about 50% larger. Additionally, there's an unused enemy in the game data named Fly Guy. which is a flying Shy Guy using a propeller. It's unknown where this would have been used in the game, and there are also 9 more unused enemies that are unused, but some of them were still present in the previous games of the series. Luigi in the background. In Paper Mario Sticker Star, Luigi can be seen sitting in the background of 5 different stages. Using Paper Eyes, the player can even pull him off the page where he will run off screen. Every time the player does this, the leftmost house in the DeKalb suburbs will have a numerous newspaper article about Luigi being spotted in that location. If the player finds him all 5 times, he will appear during the credits. Final boss foreshadowing. In Color Splash at Sunglow Ridge, Huey manages to clean up a whole mess of black paint. At first, it seems to be a one-time thing, but it's a clue to his role in the final boss fight where you have to use him to absorb the black paint off of Bowser. Familiar faces in Francis' room. In Super Paper Mario, the player can go into one of Francis's password-protected rooms in chapters 3 through 4. You can look on the shelves to find items and characters from Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door, including Petuni, Vivian, and all the Yoshi colors. Absent characters. After the pre-release interview revealing the restrictions of Paper Mario Origami King, fans mistook one of them to mean specific original characters could not be reused across the games, even if they met the rules. Producer Kensuke Tanabe really stated that he hoped Ollie and Olivia would remain in the hearts of viewers even if they were not seen after Origami King. The game has a stronger role for Sombrero Guy and a name drop for Kirsty, whereas the previous games included the explicit reappearance of the Sniffit or Whiffit host for a stage, indicating the misunderstanding and some wiggle room. The statement and example were most likely phrased that way to avoid spoiling Ollie and Olivia's irreversible deaths at the game's conclusion. Mystery code in Sticker Star. In World 5-1 Shy Guy Jungle, one of the things Mario can find in the pile of trash is a serial key. Some say that this is an actual serial key for something, but what it's really for is unknown. We do know for sure that it is not a Club Nintendo or eShop code, because both codes will display wrong code instead of code has already been entered. Gulliver references. In Animal Crossing New Leaf, the NPC Gulliver will mention not meeting such a noble skipper since Bobbery of Rogueport, making references to Paper Mario: The Thousand-Year Door and Bobbery specifically. He also references the Over There, a reference to Chapter 7 in Super Paper Mario. Infinite Happy Flower Badges. In the original Paper Mario, on the east path of Flower Fields, there is a set of 3 trees that will drop a Happy Flower Badge when hit in the correct order. If the badge is left uncollected and the trees are hit again in the same order, another Happy Flower Badge will spawn. This can be done to repeatedly spawn multiple Happy Flower Badges, however the game will start to act as if there's only one. Flavio Glitch. This is a glitch that players can use to sequence break certain parts of the game, allowing the player to travel with Flavio through the entire game. He even appears in cutscenes where Mario is not on screen. Herringway Glitch. Herringway can be changed into a standard bumpty or become invisible by pausing the game soon after Mario and Herringway enter the mayor's room. This can also be done shortly after starting a dialogue with the detective in Chapter 7. He will resurface if he is invisible when the room is left. When the mayor gives Herringway the present, the game will freeze and a debug screen will appear if he becomes the typical bumpty. When specific carrying sprites are supposed to be utilized, he just becomes temporarily invisible in the Virtual Console release. Otherwise, he develops a happy look and sometimes swiftly flaps his flippers. Despite the mixed receptions on many of the entries within this series, Paper Mario is still a staple within Nintendo's catalog. And with the recent addition into the series, Paper Mario will only remain in the hearts of many. Like and subscribe if you'd like to see more videos like this, and let us know what topics we should cover next. Rare brought the world a host of some of the most beloved characters and franchises to ever appear on the small screen. After they turned the world of video games upside down with the Donkey Kong Country series, they were ready to share one of their most iconic games to date. A game that many consider to be one of the greatest platformers of all time, and ultimately becoming one of the most critically acclaimed titles in the 64-bit era. This is the Banjo-Kazooie Iceberg. Banjo's first appearance. Before becoming the all-star partner of Kazooie, Banjo the Bear starred in Diddy Kong Racing. Though the famed N64 game didn't feature Kazooie, it did feature Tip Top, who would go on to appear in Banjo-Kazooie as a choir teacher inside Tank Top Shell in Bubble Gloob Swamp. During the Microsoft acquisition of Rare, Tip Top was included as a Banjo-Kazooie character, confirming his connection with the series. Project Dream. Before the concept of Banjo-Kazooie, the premise existed as a completely different project. After Rare's incredible work on Killer Instinct and Donkey Kong Country, two titles were greenlit. One was Donkey Kong 64, and the other was a fresh IP about a boy partaking in a magical adventure on a pirate island. This took on the codename Project Dream, otherwise known as Dream Land of Giants, and spent an exhaustive 16 months in development. DK64 went on to become fully realized, however Project Dream was scrapped. Instead, the team would utilize much of Dream's foundation, including some of the game's music, using a more fleshed out version of a character from Diddy Kong Racing, who was a secondary character in the Dream project. In 2015, Rare shared footage and insights on the cancelled game. We also learned that much of Dream's themes and concepts would serve as inspiration for one of Rare's future titles, Sea of Thieves. Stop and Swap. Perhaps the holy grail of Banjo-Kazooie mysteries, Stop and Swap was an element within BK and its sequel where the developers intended to have a number of hidden eggs and an ice key that can be obtained by swapping the Banjo-Kazooie and Banjo-Tooie cartridges within 10 seconds or less. However, due to hardware limitations, the time allotted to swap between cartridges was only around 1 second. Even if it was possible, the damage it would potentially cause to the system and the hardware made it a gamble at best. There are theories abound as to its deeper aspects, such as unmentioned abilities the characters can use. Many claim the cancelled 64 disk drive was intended to be utilized to swap the data. Community members were even able to find lengthy in-game codes that could be used to unlock the eggs in the original game. Despite the mysteries revolving around the stop and swap items, the Xbox version of the game reintroduced them, except this time in correspondence to Banjo-Kazooie Nuts and Bolts. As players gathered the items in the arcade version, they unlocked some of the rare vehicle parts in Nuts and Bolts. You can find a number of speculations regarding the items from the original, and many videos have been dedicated directly to them. Missing characters. After saving Tooty from Gruntilda at the finale of the first game, Tooty only makes minor cameos after it. Rare did see it fit to include an Easter egg in the sequel in the form of a missing sign featuring the character, acknowledging her disappearance, as well as a picture inside of Banjo's house. She also has a few cameos in Nuts and Bolts. Similar to Tooty, Gruntilda also has no firm reappearances after the original game. Giant's Lair. This was believed to be a cut area from the beta version of the game, alongside Mount Fire Eyes. However, according to Greg Males, one of the primary minds behind Banjo-Kazooie, neither the Giant's Lair nor Mount Fire Eyes officially existed. These two theorized areas were both the same area, and it simply served as a test level for development and hardware testing purposes. Mysterious Door in Grunty's Lair. There exists a door in Grunty's Lair that can be seen near the beginning of the game. Later in the game, the door can be found, however, it is inaccessible. Not surprisingly, playground rumors were abound about the mysterious door.
Hey, what's up, guys? This is Emilio. I'm sort of chiming in from the future here because yeah, there was quite a bit of things that happened since the end of the episode. In fact, I actually didn't record me fully completing the piece, so I'm inserting this additional portion to the end of the episode to just give you a little bit more of an idea. So we're just not looking, you know, obviously the image was all done up and all ready to go, but I wanted to give it a little bit more love. So here I am up in Photoshop, and this is the completed piece. But I'm gonna, you know, I'm not gonna just show you the piece. I'm gonna actually go through the process of me getting to this point, and also from what you've seen from the last, I don't know, what, 4 episodes I think it is. Anyway, so yeah, let's go and start from the beginning. So I'm just, oh, there it is. It's all loaded up. So right here, what you're seeing is the first version of the David Martinez piece that I did, right? It was initially, you see me slow down because this is a huge file, by the way, guys. So what you're seeing is this was like a little fun, quick drawing that I had done. Just because, you know, I really enjoyed the show, and I think the character David is kind of fun, cool looking. I decided to draw the sort of, you know, kid version of him. But if you notice in the corner there, you see this sort of prefab missing box. Well, that prefab missing box is essentially, I knew at the point that I drew this originally that I wanted to put something back there, whether it be a Lucy or whether it be Rebecca. Eventually, I just decided to put both of them in. So let me just tear this hole down. Just pulling all of it. Boop. So there you go. Get rid of the prefab missing box. Yep, that's it. So let me just, I'm tearing this whole thing down for you guys, so you can just see what I initially started with. You know what? Let me throw a little. New layer here so you can see the line art. All right. See, you see me searching through here. This is me sort of looking through. So yeah, this is how it all started, and you know, obviously I was pretty. Is this the final one? So yeah, this is the original drawing that I had done. I actually started. This is the sketch right here, the first sketch. I did this sketch like really quickly in clips, and not clip, and what this looks like. It's Easy Paint Tool Sci. So then after that, from there, I did. I'm trying to find my drawing. First rule, guys, is to name all of your layers. I still don't do that, by the way. And that's just more of the sketch. And this is the initial drawing. That's the raw color, where this is all you know, from one of the model sheets. This is a tint layer to sort of tint the color. But then eventually, yeah, and then this right here is a gradient. So you have 2 of those things there. Then this is the glow to the back of his collar. His collar has a bit of a glow to it. This is how the rim lighting started, but then it eventually kind of, I updated it. This is the shine to his eyes. This is a little bit more glow to it. Some additional blacks for the you know, to pop his head up forward a little bit. This is a glow, which you can't fully see now because it's sort of blending in, but it's a little bit there. That one, I don't know what that is, to be honest. Let's see what it is. Let's just, for the hell of it, let's find out what that is. Oh, it's a totally empty layer, so it's garbage. That is the glow for the box, which you will see, and this is the logo and the Cyberpunk Edgerunners logo and my signature Later on, I separated them. So when I initially put the prefab missing box, it was actually a lot larger, but I shrunk it down because I felt it wasn't, it was too much. That's the line art to it, and maybe a little bit of shading on the side. And I mulled around about what colors I wanted to make the thing. But so what I did is I actually was inspired by the opening of Edgerunners, and I went with this sort of yellow, which is the Cyberpunk colors. It's actually at least from what it seems like it's called, there's a code to it, and it's called Cyberpunk Yellow. I don't know if that's ever that existed before, but yeah, there you go. So that is this original older version. So now later on, when New York Comic Con was coming around, I actually got told that I was going to be at New York Comic Con fairly late. So I decided to go in and actually do an update to it. And you're going to see that eventually. Again, large file. Oh yeah, this is actually a slightly alternate version. All right, this is not the adjustment, but there's a slight adjustments to this one, which I kept all the stuff to, and that's that version. And then it's gonna pop in, boop. So just turn off that. So this is, you can just see all the adjustments that I did to this. A lot of this is pretty dark, and did some additional drawing fixes, changed around the box. So let's get into this one. Again, a lot more stuff that I added to it. I really like the sort of colorful, like, I don't know, flash mode that he has. So I added those in too to sort of separate it visually from the thing. I also gave it a little bit of a white color. Not a white color, but white. So what happens in print is a lot of times, especially when you use really, really dark colors, sometimes they don't show up in print. And me working in comics for so many years, I couldn't recognize when my stuff is not working for color. This darker version, if you'd see it, as cool as it looks on your screen, which is a really nice bright screen, when it comes down to print, those sorts of things don't look as good. Sometimes the darks look too dark, and you'll lose a bunch of stuff. So sometimes I'll add a little bit like a 5% on white on top of it, and then everything prints darker than what you see on the screen. So that's what I did there. And again, a lot of this is just all the same file underneath it. So that's that stuff. This is one of the boxes. This is the smaller box that I fixed. That's an even smaller box. I think I ended up with the smaller box, the even smaller box. And then these are the alternate colored version. What I did was I just duplicated the original line art for this, and to do that. And so there's still sketches in here. So let's go into this is the Japanese logo. I found the Japanese logo, but it was just Cyberpunk. So what I did was I actually added the Edgerunners part to it. I'm not exactly sure where I found it, to be honest, but the text is all what I translated. Hopefully it's right. you Japanese folks who are watching this will tell me that you screwed up or something. Anyway, that is David right there. I have the white on so that you can see all the different stuff that I did underneath. Just bring it down to formula again. So this is the updated line art. You can see that there's a lot of stuff that I did on this guy. Redid his face. There's some, redid the way the jacket lays, all that sort of stuff to make it look cool. So I think this version is probably the best of it. And then again, the color, I had to redo the color because the line art had changed around. This is the deeper color. And what's great about this one is that, if I wanted to, let's first take a second and pull out the old tablet pen, right? And what I can do is I can actually just turn it back disable the layer mask and it's all my stuff there, or enable it, or if I, let's say I want to do a little like, I want to give him sort of a cool looking shadow, so I can actually do stuff like that and still keep the integrity of what I originally did underneath there. Just go back into the thing so I remember what everything was. This is to darken the bottom half. This is some additional rendering that I did. I felt like, the shadow seemed a bit flat, so I just added a little bit of extra, like a second light source. More blacks to sort of pop the eyes and do all that stuff. This is the glow. This is the updated rim light that I did, is just to fit the new drawing. This is to brighten up the top half a little bit more. This is just another. I felt like the lines felt like a little bit too wishy-washy because of the pen I was using. This is the glow. That's the eye shine. This is what right here is what I used to make the blur. So you'll see the blur come up right there. Or is this the blur? Yeah, this is the blur. Which one's the blur? Yeah, this is what I used to make the blur. If you notice his little feet there and all that stuff, he's got a little bit of a blur to it. Just kind of soften it off the image. Then, obviously, this is right. Oh, well, actually, let me show you this. This is actually kind of cool. Right here is the additional changes that I did to the arms. So what I knew, so I knew what I was going to do because I did a quick draw over on my own myself. This is the blur. This is the box, the updated box, of which is like there's two different versions. It's the extra large box, this is the medium, and this is the smaller. I also redid the action lines on the floor to sort of look a little bit better. And then that's this second version of the David Martinez illustration, which that's the glow. And then we have all this other stuff right here. And that's the second version. So obviously, I came back again, totally meaning that I was going to come back and do an alternate version of this image. So enter the new version. This one is obviously changed around a little bit. I changed where the shadows were and all that other stuff. So let's go through this one again. And you can see the work that I originally did. Oops, that's Rebeca. So let's now these ones I marked a little bit better, so you can actually see which one's which. So it's David. So David, I actually didn't do any sort of adjustments to since I did that. Everything that was before is on this one. So he's got all the little shines. He's got all this stuff. Just removed some of the other things, and I changed some of the rim light color a little bit. Made it a little hotter. But so yeah, for Rebeca, Lucy, I keep saying that. For Lucy, what I did was she's got actually a bunch of stuff underneath here. Let's just turn off David so you can guys see what that looks like. Because I actually, obviously you if you watched the previous streams, you saw me that I went in and did this. So right here is. This is her original. Let me get her. Again, not naming anything, which you should do. So that's her line art. Initially, what I did again was that I make sure that I do. I like to have a baseline. So you have it. When I worked in animation on a show called Venture Brothers, you probably heard of it. What we would do is we had alternate whenever characters would go into different environments of different color values or different, have different lighting. What we would do is we relight the color, we would do a lit version. So this right here would be a baseline lit Lucy. And then from there, we make our different palettes. So right here is the palette. I initially did this version where I was like, I did that, and then I did 2 different versions, and then I cut into it so they do my shadow work. Then that's another bit of shadow right there. Here is a little bit of extra secondary light sourcing. I don't think I did that on the last part, the first part of this episode. This is her rim light. This is a little extra blacks to sort of pop her neck forward. That is the smoke. What's on this layer? I think there's nothing here. Yep, it's an empty layer. Because, sometimes you do that. And yeah, that's the smoke from her cigarette. That's the light of her cigarette. That's the glow. And that's a little bit of an extra pop for her lighting, because it seems a little bit too dark. And it also helps pop David forward when he's on there. So the next one we'll show off is Rebeca. All right. So that's our Rebeca. And you saw me do if you went to you were in the other episodes, or you saw the last part of this one, I did her all colored up and everything. But did her flat colored version, which is the lit version if you were working in animation. Then what I did was, obviously, I created an alternate color palette, and then what I did is I also blued it up a little bit to sort of match with the other. So I had this one. This is actually her. If you were looking at what I was doing in the episode, I was doing a dark version of this. This is her initial shade color, and then just doing that, and then doing a tint on top. This is to sort of separate her. That is the rim light. Not rim light, but a little bit of an extra light source. So you can see that without it. This is the rim light. That's some blacks to sort of, again, for her eyelashes and the bottom of her neck. Eye shine. What is this? Another eye? Oh, this is eye shine glow. This is a glow on the eye shine. This is a glow for the rim. And that's additional there. An additional for the lighting. Because again, her lighting, her shadow color and her lit color, at least in the original model, are fairly close. I think there's a little bit of it's fairly close. So what I did was I added a little bit of extra to it to pop it up, and there you go. That is Rebeca. Working David. David has his 2 shadow versions of himself, which I did some additional work on. Then this is some eye shine for David, his glow, but this also has a little bit of a glow to separate Rebeca from the ground. So she's got a little bit of a like this yellow lighting these yellow shadows are essentially lighting her. This is the white that I talked about before. Obviously my signature on top. And then sometimes what I tend to do is I sort of like the feel of I'll show you now. Any day now, computer. I know you're chugging along on this one. There you go. Yeah, this file is stupidly huge. It's 800 megabytes. So it's getting close to a gig. I might go in and sort of reconfigure some of my previous versions in here. But anyway, sometimes I like to add a little bit of noise to it to sort of soften up the image. Another thing I like to do is, and I think I might have done it for the initial version of this, at least the first version of this, but sometimes I like to add a little bit of chromatic aberration to it. I'll show you what that is. So I'm going to make a new layer, go to here, create a new layer. Then what I'm going to do is make a sort of duplicate merged version of everything. You're going to see that happen now. Merge visible. That's at least what it's called. Yes, and you have to deal with this because this is happening. It's a big file. If I were to open this during the stream, it would probably crash the stream initially. So, this would be considered a blessing in disguise, right? Because at least I'll be able to do this, record it in early, later on, and so that you can see exactly the work. I was doing on it. I probably shouldn't have made everything merged. Anyway, so we made our merged version of this. And again, then sometimes what I like to do is use lens correction to create something what is called chromatic aberration. What chromatic aberration is if you ever take a photo and sometimes at the edges of the photo, because there's multiple lenses inside of your camera, it creates this sort of soft image, and it's actually used a lot in video games too. A really good recent example of this is actually Nier Automata. If you ever look at Nier Automata, at the edges of the image, there are like these sort of, it's almost like an image softening. And that is what chromatic aberration is. It's sort of like a distortion that happens with lenses. Photoshop has the ability to get rid of those things, and what it causes these three essentially a weird three color separation. So that's what this is. So you can use this to remove chromatic aberration, but also if you do it a certain way, you can also use it to add chromatic aberration, and it gives it that sort of soft lens look. So if you notice it right now, you can actually see, like, from the image, it looks a little bit like softer. And I'll show you a zoom up too. So now it looked like it just blew it up, and what it did is now it added a little bit of, it also added this sort of weird sort of coloring to it. And you can adjust how much this weirdness happens to it, but when you look at it from far, you don't see it. It just looks like it's a little bit softer. But yeah, but it gives it a sort of an interesting look to it. To be honest, a lot of artists tend to use use chromatic aberration. And even I just sort of use it sort of sparingly because it is used so much. But it gives us sort of an interesting sort of look to it. Another thing, and then coupled with the sort of the noise, it almost gives it somewhat of a filmic quality. Another thing you can do with the adjustments to chromatic aberration. Let's go back. So now it doesn't have any chromatic aberration anymore. We can go back to lens correction. Go back again, and then what we can also do is with the chromatic, maybe we just take it a little less, make it a little not as drastic. But we can also add add distortion or remove distortion. Again, something that happens like from fisheye lenses and things like that, you get these sorts of distortions that happen. Like, so what you can do is, like, chromatic aberration also adds a little bit of distortion to it. So what you can do is you can also add a little weirdly distort it within this filter. You can also add in, and those of you who know have Instagram or on your phones, you can add a little bit of an outline, like a little bit of a dark point on the ends of it, sort of bring in the focus. So there you go, and I'll show you what that looks like all together. So sometimes this stuff takes a while because it's image processing. So what you see, you just saw it right there, right? It went boop and distorted the image. And these are things that also naturally happen if you take photos. And then couple that with a little bit of the thing there, it kind of gives it an interesting look. And it probably makes David's hair look a little bit too high, but who cares? Anyway, it looks interesting. And if you want to try it out, you should, just to give your image, jazz up your image. But again, remember, the more effects and things like that you do, sometimes it doesn't work out right. You know what? Alright, there's all light channels and stuff. Let's put this right back. Alright, so yeah, back to formula, as the scientist from Spider-Man said, and then the goblin lost his mind. Anyway, whatever. So Yeah, that's it for this episode of Throwdown Draws. Thank you for hanging around for this. I think this was a pretty long one. Anyway, hope to see you again. I'm not exactly sure if I'm going to be doing another Throwdown Draws. I may end up doing another Throwdown, not Throwdown Draws, but a throwing session on my own YouTube channel. Stay tuned to my Twitter for that. You should see my Twitter pop up on the bottom or, on the end screen. But anyway, thanks for joining me, and I hope to see you next time.